Hey guys, how you going? I hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing another movie review, so hopefully you find this one interesting. This movie is a horror film from Poland, Polish language English subs, released in the year 2021, directed by Bartosz M. Kowalski, and this film is called Nobody Sleeps in the Woods Tonight 2. So Nobody Sleeps in the Woods Tonight 2 is a continuation on from the first film. You have the main character who survived the onslaught of these horrible mutant hillbillies, and she was the only survivor, and now they're in waiting cells in a remote police station until they get transferred to the city. So the chief of this police station, he wants answers. The answers that are given from the main character are very incoherent, so he believes that this young woman is either on drugs or is insane. So he wants to actually clarify things, so he tells his colleagues he's going to take this woman to the crime scene in order to try and refresh her memory, and in the meantime the colleagues have to look after the villains. So it's been a long time since the colleagues have actually heard from the chief, and so they're getting curious, and so they decide, two of them, to go to the crime scene to try and find out what's going on. But this is the start of their nightmare, because when they get to the crime scene they realise something horrible has happened that has turned their evening from curiosity and boredom into a bloody fight for survival. And so whether or not they can make it out alive is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Nobody Sleeps in the Woods Tonight 2. I was actually very surprised that this was actually made into a sequel. Now the first movie had a lot of good things going for it, but I didn't think as though it was executed very well. But obviously it has a fan base because there was another movie made, and so it was definitely a movie that had no sort of marketing, and so I didn't really have high expectations coming into this one. This is a film that has a lot of hate. A lot of people thought that was very silly, it didn't make sense, it was just completely random nonsense. And so for that, I know better than to judge a film based on what others think, but it is hard to shape that sort of first impression that this is not going to be a very good experience. But having an experience from the first film that wasn't all that good, I thought I have nothing to lose. So yes, this movie is very silly, it's very random, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but surprisingly I actually found myself enjoying this movie a lot more than I thought I would. I thought as though this movie was a lot better than the first film, and what I appreciated most about this movie is that Bartosz M. Kowalski was taking a risk. This is not a generic sequel, which is, I can understand why a lot of people might not like that, because if you like the first film, this is a movie that does contain the same atmosphere, and you know that you're in the same sort of world, but it's a completely different experience. And that's something that I really enjoyed, is that yes, you're having that same lore, and you're having the same sort of feeling, so you know you're watching and Nobody Sleeps in the Woods Tonight 2, but having a completely different experience showcases the confidence that this director has. And so in a world where it is all about generic rehashing of the first film that made this franchise successful, it's very easy to just keep copying what has been done before, and ultimately it does become generic and you feel as though you're just watching the same film over and over and over. But this movie, yes, it had that same sort of world building, but it had a completely different balls to the wall crazy element to it. So I felt as though not only was it a sequel, but it was also expanding itself in that world building, which is something that a sequel should do. So yes, it is very silly, but I thought as though yes, I enjoyed it because it was so much different to what I was expecting. This is a film that has very, very good production. The soundtrack, once again, is absolutely phenomenal. This is one of the best sounding films that I've heard in a very long time. Just the simple score created a tension to it that I thought was very unnerving, very creepy. There was some moments that I thought the horror set pieces were really well done, and it's very brutal. There is one scene especially involving someone's face that I'm not going to give away, that surprised me. And so the brutality is actually taken up a notch from the first film. The first movie I thought wasn't brutal enough. It was a silly sort of slasher type of movie that I thought it needed really brutal kills, but it kind of held off on that regard. Whereas this movie, I wouldn't necessarily call it a slasher, I'd just call it a very weird sort of not paranormal, but a really weird monster movie that just, yes, it doesn't make a lot of sense and it does hit you out of left field, but it's something that you weren't expecting. And so this is everything that I believe sequels should do, taking a risk, putting your neck on the chopping block and actually acknowledging the fact that, okay, if I take risks, then I might get a negative response. But it's the showcase of a very, very confident director, and I thought the confidence in this movie seeps through into what was a very random, very, very, very bizarre experience, but it's an experience that I actually got a lot more than I was anticipating. So the acting was fairly decent. I thought the gore effects were fantastic. Once again, not overdone, so I thought as though it could have ratcheted up a little bit more gore, but there's some of the scenes I thought were really, really effective, and just the story and the way it transpires, I really liked it. I really like strange films, and so if you're not a fan of strange cinema and you want cinema that makes a lot of sense, then I can understand why you might hate this movie. But for me, I just thought as though there was a lot of connection attention to what was going on. There were some really tender moments, and tender moments in a very bizarre way. I'm not going to give anything away, but you'll know exactly what I mean. And I thought as though the tenderness is amplified because of the fact the score is so good. I don't know, this hit me out of nowhere as far as the score and the overall theme. I thought was absolutely fantastic, and it just gave it an otherworldly presence, and that presence just creates that sheer random sort of bizarre quality that I thought made the movie very enjoyable. And so it surprises me to say it because I was expecting to hate it, but I thought as though this is a sequel that is a forgotten art. You're basically taking the same lore that the first film had and expanding it in a way that's completely different, but it stays within the world that the first film created. And so if you feel as though you're getting sick of generic sequels that just rehash what made the first film good, then I definitely think that Nobody Sleeps in the Woods Tonight 2 is for you. This is one of the rare occasions where the sequel is actually better than the first film, but be careful if you're after a movie that makes sense and has a very fluid sort of fluent plot, then this is not for you. But for me, wanting something a little bit different, that's exactly what I got. So overall, for Nobody Sleeps in the Woods Tonight 2, going to give this one 3.5 stars. Shocks me to say it because I was expecting to hate it, but I certainly didn't. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later.